Hi, this is Chloe Sears, and this is my alternative assignment for Module 4, in which we read the essay Descartes and Hobbes and watched the video Heroes of the Enlightenment. So, within the essay, I definitely recognized a common theme of this idea of the beginning of rational thinking in regards to philosophy. I definitely thought it was interesting because it started to show that people were doubting what was being said by the church and by the society, and they were starting to think for themselves in a way that helped them develop consciousness within their society and start asking these big questions of themselves. So I thought that was really interesting. Going into Descartes' ideas, I definitely saw this, again, another common theme, that he believed that science and mathematics were going to prove things better than what was already accepted by society. And I also thought that was interesting because it definitely related to the ideas of Newton that were presented within the video. This idea that Newton wanted to utilize science and utilize nature, and in his book, The Book of Nature, just wanting to utilize the facts and the things that were evident to prove that the different ideas of society as well as the early ideas of philosophy. It definitely talked, I think that Descartes' ideas replaced known ideas with thinking and rational theories and facts. And he started off by saying, within the essay, it was said that you had to first start by doubting everything. Now, I thought that was a really interesting idea. I think that it's really necessary within a society to doubt everything that you're told. Well, I think that it can get a little bit extensive, is that it's a good idea to think, well, do I accept this? It's being told to me in this specific way. Now, is there evidence to show that this is actually true, or is somebody trying to push their own beliefs on me? Or I just think it's really interesting because it allows for even more of that developing of consciousness, and still at a very early time within the stages of consciousness, and the ideas of wisdom and all that type of stuff. I thought it was really interesting that it was, that was a pretty big step, I think, by doubting every single thing that you're told. It was very different than how it used to be in that time, that the church is always right and that the church is going to tell you exactly how things are supposed to be. So I thought that was really interesting. One of the things that was presented within the essay, in the portion that was talking about Descartes, that kind of confused me was his idea of the fact of your own doubt cannot be doubted. Now, that was really hard for me to grasp because it just didn't make sense. And it still is a little bit misconstrued within my mind, but I was able to come to the conclusion that by first doubting something that somebody tells you, that doubt and that question that you ask cannot be wrong. So if somebody from the church told you something that it was this specific way, you saying, well, maybe I don't think it's that way, cannot be disputed. Is that idea of maybe it's this way, or I'm asking this question, is completely true and cannot be proved as incorrect. And the example that was given within the essay was this idea of saying that you doubt your own existence, but by doubting your own existence, you're proving that you exist. Because by doubting, do I maybe exist, you're able to say, yes, I do, because it cannot be doubted that you do. So I thought that was interesting. Still a little bit confused about it, but I think I was able to come to a little bit better of a conclusion. I also thought something, I don't know if it was really an emotional response, but I thought it was really interesting how Descartes, they were talking about, needing to doubt everything first, but the idea of God was self-evident. Something existed outside of his own mind. So I just thought it was interesting, that there's all this rational, everything, rational, utilizing science and mathematics to prove everything, and wanting to find evidence that things actually do exist, especially in the 6 points that were presented within the essay, in the list. But I just thought it was interesting that it was, that God was self-evident, and I do believe that. I believe this idea that there's this higher power, and that it's there, and that there's no proving, and based on the Bible and everything and all the stories that were told and stuff like that. But I just thought it was interesting that it's they're going for hard evidence and doubting of everything else, but God is the exception because it's self-evident without having any concrete evidence. Really interesting. Thought it was a really interestingly presented idea. Very different than the other stuff that they were talking about, needing self-doubt within that time. Now, switching gears over to Thomas Hobbes. His ideas were definitely a little bit different than Descartes'. Descartes' ideas definitely being more based on science, and Thomas Hobbes were more, his ideas later were more practical purposes, so he was focusing more on that. And one of the quotes he utilized was, "The end of knowledge is power." And I interpreted that definitely in today's day and age. It's able to be interpreted in this idea of knowledge is power, because going to college allows for you to have more opportunities within society, which one could say would lead to a bigger sense of power. And by having more education, you're able to further your standing within society. So I think that by saying that the end of knowledge is power, is that when you get furthest in your education and you're developing your own sense of consciousness, you have gained the sense of power because you have more knowledge than other people might have. So I think that was really interesting. I also didn't really know very much about the different ideas of being a rationalist versus being an empiricist. I thought that those were two interesting ideas that with the I don't know if I'm saying it, empiricist, right? That you're starting with the senses, so the things that you can see, smell, taste, hear. And then a rationalist is looking to the mind to develop the truth about what our senses tell us. So it's kind of this idea that what you see and what you hear first then needs to be proved by this idea of you are looking into your inner self and your developed consciousness, and you're able to further develop these ideas and further rationalize these senses. Another thing that I thought was really interesting that was presented by Hobbes was this idea that humans are basically bad. Now, I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. I think that humans definitely are looking for a sense of power, is that they see things that they want and they go towards it and they work really hard and it becomes competitive and people go towards gaining their goals and can, do not good things in the beginning. But I don't think that a want for power is necessarily aligned with the idea that we're basically bad and this idea that we're only going towards our power. I think that there's more than that. But yeah, I just thought it was interesting that he made such a broad generalization that all humans are the basis of what we want is bad. I also thought a really interesting thing that was presented was this idea that in order to understand society, we need to break down into little parts. I thought that allusion to a car versus the ideas of society and how you're going to be able to understand philosophy further was really interesting, because it's like it's taking each little piece apart and being able to see how it fits together and how that allows society to function, and how each individual's experience with philosophy and each individual's experience with the development of consciousness is allowing us to shape what actually is our society. Another thing that I thought was really interesting was how he talked about the fundamental motivation was to survive and avoid death. Now that kind of provoked a question in me. I was kind of like, is that the same now? Because that was a long time ago, and I think that on the ground basis, I would agree and say that, yes, at the most primal stage of our life and where we are, yes, what we're doing is we're surviving and avoiding death. However, I think that we've gotten to a point where we understand our own consciousness enough that we're able to work towards things that we want and have more luxury within our lives rather than just the basis of I'm trying to survive within society. I think that we've gotten to the point where it's less of survival and more of living. This idea, I interpreted it as getting to indulge yourself in the things that you enjoy rather than a survival being that this is the ground, this is the bare minimum that I can have in my life at this point in order to continue down a path of making sure that I avoid death. So I just think I made me ask the question, is it the same now? Like, is our only fundamental idea to survive and avoid death? Another thing that was presented within the essay, I thought it was really interesting, the idea that we're victims of thoughts, emotions, and sensations, and that kind of brought on an emotional response, a positive one, because, and I think it did, is because I definitely still agree with that. It's that a lot of people's inner self is going through, is trying to understand their emotions. I think that's a really big thing in philosophy, at least for me, is trying to understand my own intentions and my own philosophy, my own consciousness and my own emotions, and I'm kind of a victim to that because you can get really lost within that and lose your path because you you get so caught up in your thoughts and your emotions and everything, and you can lose your path towards your developing your knowledge, which in turn develops your power. So I think that that's really interesting. I also thought it was really interesting that the idea that was presented that we need power and that we want power, and that power is competitive because people have unlimited desires. I think it was really interesting. Okay, so this idea that people are working towards getting what they want, and because some people have these desires that are continual and that they need them and that they want to continue to gain power, it becomes this competition. I definitely think that's true. You see it within the workplace, is that these people are continually trying to get to the top of the, I'm just thinking of like a business type of thing, is that people are continually trying to change their ranks, is like get higher, 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 and it becomes competitive because these people are working towards the same goal within their society to try to get to the best possible place that they can. While in that sense, I think that that is an instrumental type of idea, having to do with reputation, riches, and friends, rather than natural with original assets of strength and intel and the idea of knowledge and stuff like that. Anyways, I thought that and how that related to politics, was this idea that you were able to buy or trade, and by doing that, you're able to have your beliefs and the things that you want within your society. At least in politics, I think about it is that, like, as a person, I represent these three, different ideas, and that's my power. And by giving up something that I have as an ideal within myself, I'm giving up some of my power. But by doing that, I'm able to continue to rule and continue to have my power. So as I give up things, my power is getting less and less and less because I'm having less supporters and less of just all sorts of stuff. Anyway, I really appreciate you listening to my response. Thanks.